quickly
I'm
for
Coach Seb, and
3
this
to
is
13
Running New
miles.
Mexico. Right. So, going back to getting onto the C3 team,
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of runs were you doing that they saw you like just running around and were like, hey, come join us, let's try out?
Some of my college teammates really love to tell this story, and they probably even tell it better than I do. But yeah, I think by my sophomore year of college, I was running 7 to 9 miles 6 days a week. No, like what I today think of as a workout or as doing strides or doing a long run. None of that. Had no idea how any of that worked. I was really just going out for about an hour, pretty easy, on the roads of Lewiston, Maine, after class, almost every day. Um, and I got to know some of the other people who were on the track and cross country teams sort of through other extracurricular activities. It's a small school. People did a lot of different activities. So I sort of was friendly with a couple of them, and we ended up just running on some of the same roads at approximately the same time because it was after class. That's when they had cross country practice. That's when I had my free hour. So I would head out for an hour run, and I would often see them, and sometimes I would pass them on their easy runs, and they thought, who is this guy who we see like multiple times a week on the same roads, who often passes us? Because I mean, they were jogging 7-minute pace, and I didn't know them, and I didn't want to run with them because it was a big group of them, and I thought like, ooh, I don't want to like interfere on what they have going, so I would sometimes run 6:30 pace to get around them and then carry on or something. So they just thought, who is this guy? And it took a couple months, but some of the people that I knew through other activities, they kind of talked to me and they said, oh, like we see that you run, you should come join the team. You seem like you're pretty serious about it. And for a while I thought I was affirmative, I was firm, I did not want to do it. Because I was operating under the mistaken assumption that it was going to take too much away from other aspects of my life. And it took a couple months of them coaxing until eventually the sort of then captain, I think at the time, of the team was someone I knew through student government. He said, look, we have this was a January of, I think, my sophomore year. He said, look, Bates College is hosting a little indoor track meet. It was early in the season. A couple other schools are coming. And he's like, you should run the 5K and just see sort of what happens. And I didn't really want to do it. I'd never run a 5 kind of track before. I had seen some of these college times, and most of the guys that were on my college team would run anywhere from 14:50 to 16 minutes in the 5K. And I don't actually remember what my fastest 5K was at that point. I think it was 18 something. And he said, look, like, just come run this race with us. It'll be fun. Sort of. I didn't really anticipate it at the time, but he did sort of have an ulterior motive of hoping that I would join the team. And he had talked to the coach about it, and it was all the stuff I found out afterwards. So I ran this race with them and ran 15:50 something, which was like a 2-minute 5K PR, something like that. And it was just, I was blown away at how fast I had managed to run. It was not last in this race, this like January D3 indoor race up in Maine. And a couple weeks later, I sort of broke down and signed up for the team, and yeah, and I've been getting like steadily faster ever since. And I had a really great time at Bates College. The coach there was really excellent for sort of my kind of stage of development, and I ended up making some really great lifelong friends on the Bates team, and guys I still talk to regularly. And it was actually it was a great decision in retrospect. I had a great time.
That is amazing. Again, like the fact that you're doing, like you're talking about, like 6 to 9 miles, like just going on an hour, most days of the week.
Yeah.
And that's not something a lot of people would just do on their own to stay fit.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't quite know. Like I had done a tiny bit of running in elementary school. I had done the run for the zoo in what must have been 2002 or something. My like elementary school PE coach saw that I was, a little bit better at capture the flag than some of the other 9-year-olds, and was like, you should just like sign up and run this 5K. And I definitely vomited afterwards, but I ran 20, I don't know, 24, 25 minutes, some 23. I don't remember, but I did have a little bit of familiarity with sort of the concept of long distance running. Um, there was that apparently really formative, 6-week cross country season in middle school at the academy,
Right.
apparently. But yeah, and I just enjoyed running in college even before I joined the team because it was just, you know, I was reading a lot, I was inside a lot because the weather in Maine is tough, so it was just sort of an excuse to get outside and get some fresh air and get away from campus because it was a small little school. Um, and yeah, I would just find myself on these quiet back roads in Maine, just by myself out there with just the wind and the trees, and sort of it was an excuse to get away from that small little campus, an excuse to get away from the books, and sort of remind myself of the world outside that little bubble. And I was almost always just by myself out there having a great time. So um, then when other people said, "Why don't you come do that with us?" I thought, "All right, this sounds fun."
It's, running's always better with some other people around for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
um, you talk about that little bubble in tiny town in Maine. How
yeah.
did you end up going from Corrales to Maine? Like what brought you out there?
Yeah, I think I kind of knew that I wanted to go to a smaller liberal arts school for college, and I had some extended family in New England that I had known. I'd visited a few times when I was younger, so I'd been out to New England a couple times, but never planned or hoped to move to Maine ever. But I had just done a bunch of college applications. It really was just kind of luck. It was, well, I'm not even sure it was luck. It was just sort of fortuitous, kind of an accident. I just applied to a bunch of schools, some of them in Maine. Got into some, was rejected from others. Sort of got financial aid from some, got more from some, and less from others. And just based on sort of that calculus, I thought, well, I guess I'm going to Maine. Um, yeah, I didn't really plan to. Well, I at that point I did know that I wanted to go out of state. Um, just because I think I did have a little bit of that when you're 17, 18 years old. You think the place you live is the worst.
Right.
I definitely had that. I was definitely a victim of that, and just kind of wanted to change of scenery. Didn't necessarily want a change of scenery that was that far away, but things just sort of worked out like that, and started freshman year and moved in without ever having been to Maine before. So that was fun.
Did you know what to expect from the Maine winters?
No, not even a little bit. Uh, I mean, like we do definitely get like a little splash of winter here in New Mexico. I I I still think the coldest temperature I've ever experienced, I think, was in fact in New Mexico. There was that one like freak winter in 2011, maybe, when it was minus 25 or something for 4 days, and there was a natural gas problem. But
Right.
here in New Mexico, we get breaks from that. It'll be really cold for a couple days. We'll get a bunch of snow, and then it'll melt and be sunny and 55 degrees. In Maine, it's just like a high of 25 for 6 weeks straight, and you get a lot of permacloud. It's gray. The sun sets at 3:45 in the afternoon in December, January, and yeah, that was not something that I didn't even really think about when I moved out there. That was not really something that I was considering. But yeah, after a couple years of that, I was glad to get a break. But it's oddly still something I miss sometimes. When it snowed here this winter, I was like, ah, yes, I get a little bit of snow again after sort of a break from that in Austin.
It's definitely. I mean, I like having the seasons for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is definitely one perk of New Mexico, and the fact that I've lived elsewhere and have seen a lot more parts of the country than I had when I was 18. I find myself keep coming back keeping to come back to New Mexico, and you know, I like it here.
That's great. It, there's plenty of people who, again, want to leave or maybe can't leave and stay, or they
Yeah.
leave and they come back, and there's always, there's good and bad with every place, obviously. Uh, but either way, it's, doing something where you get to be here again for a little while is
Mhm.
has got to be a little cool while you decide, where it is you really want to be for, I guess, maybe your next stint.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the fact that I already sort of had a running community here because I was coming back here regularly during law school and during the first chunk of graduate school. My parents were still here in New Mexico, so it was sort of nice to have the opportunity to come back here where I already knew a lot of people and had a community that I could sort of be a part of again while I'm back here for a year and a half or so.
Yeah. So you went from Bates and you continued some running at University of Texas, Austin, correct?
Yeah, so after I left Bates, I had some eligibility left over because I had started late and I
Nice.
took a semester abroad, so I had I think more than half my eligibility left. And I ended up going to UT Austin to do a combined JD PhD program in the government department, so both law school and the PhD in the government department. And I emailed, sort of cold emailed out of the blue, Brad Herbster, who was then the head men's distance cross country track coach, and I said, "Look, I'm likely coming down to Austin for law school and graduate school. What does it look like? Like, what sort of opportunities would I have to still run for the team for a year?" And I sent him my times. I think he asked for a video of me running, so I sent him like an old Boston University flow track race or something, and I ended up being able to do sort of the equivalent of a fifth year, even though it was sort of a third year, I guess, at UT for the Texas Longhorns. Hook 'em, all that.
Yeah.
Um, and that was also a really crazy experience because I got to run Division III cross country nationals my senior year of college, and then 12 months later run Division I cross country nationals, and it was just sort of fun to get to see both those worlds and sort of the cultural distinctions, the sort of financial distinctions, all the institutional considerations that diverge across those two worlds. It was just a really unique opportunity to get to experience those two communities. And it's definitely something that I'm really glad that I did because I don't think a lot of people have the opportunity to sort of run both divisions back to back in a year like that. And yeah, it was fun. I learned a lot. I got to train with like some really talented athletes, and sort of made some more connections in the Austin community that I still have today, in the sort of Austin running community. Um, and yeah, and so that was just 1 year at UT. Um, but then I stayed at UT for 4 more years to finish graduate school, finish law school. Well, not yet finish graduate school, but finish law school and continue my PhD. So I was there for a total of 5 years, and sort of after my 1 year for the team, I was just out on my own, and I did have sort of a running community there. A lot of them are former UT runners. Some of them are really talented marathoners, Olympic trials qualifiers and all of that. There's a whole group out there because Austin, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, is really like a dramatically expanding running community, um, and it's pretty robust. So I had a lot of great running friends out there, and it was sad to leave them when I came back to Albuquerque, but at the same time, Albuquerque running is so much better than Austin running. And just in terms of the weather and the terrain, it's unbelievable. I'm firmly of the opinion that Albuquerque is the best place in the world to run. You can quote me on that. And yeah, so I will be moving back to Austin this fall, but I fully anticipate on returning to Albuquerque periodically over the next couple of years as I finish off my PhD.
And that's great. And yeah, I didn't really know much about Austin running, but
Hmm.
over, I guess it was really kind of over the pandemic, Atreyu shoe brand kind of
Yeah.
picked up out of there and kind of started following them, and they do lots of stuff around there, and it
Hmm.
definitely seems like there's a decent amount of people out there for sure. But I that humidity and heat seems like it might be a little killer.
Yeah, yeah. I do know. I don't personally know the man that runs Atreyu particularly well, but one of my friends out in Austin, Rory Tunningly, who's a former Texas runner and Olympic trials qualifier in the marathon. I used to do a lot of runs with him, and he's at least for a while. I don't know if he still is, but at least for a while was a diehard Atreyu fan. Used to wear those shoes on all his runs, and used to get all the prototypes and things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, Austin does have a pretty nice 10-mile loop that's like right in the center of the city that goes around the thing they call the lake. That's just a river, but they call it a lake. It has a dam on it, so it's a little bit wider, but it's
Okay.
just part of a river, and it's, I don't know, long and thin, whatever. Um, and that's where I would be doing a lot of my like long runs and workouts. But it does get crowded because Austin's a really growing. It's a big city and it's growing, so it gets crowded. And yeah, there are times of the year, especially between about April, May, and September, October, when the weather becomes oppressive and there's really no good time of day to run. Um, and so yeah, I don't love that, and I will be sort of having to endure that for another little bit, but hopefully I'll be able to avoid Austin during the worst months.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
Do you have a is it hard to, I mean, you can only acclimate so much, but is it hard to acclimate to that humidity and heat when you haven't been in it in a while?
It is actually, yeah. There have definitely been times when I've sort of come back to Austin after being here in Albuquerque for a little while and sort of been hit with the heat wave, and I am low energy and just sleepy all the time, simply just never feel good for 2 or 3 weeks. Sort of takes me a while to acclimate. It takes me so much longer to acclimate to that than it does to like back up to altitude here. Um, but even so, in that sort of muggy heat, when there's like a sort of a point in the morning when the humidity's dropping and the temperature's rising, if you go too early, it's too humid, and if you go too late, it's too hot. So there's like a 20-minute window, which is not long enough to do a run, but there's like a 20-minute window when it's almost tolerable. And you kind of have to pick which side of that window you're going to go on. You're going to get really sweaty, or you're going to get really hot.
Yeah.
Um, and even during those points, I just never really feel good. Just everything hurts, everything feels miserable, and really all I want to do is like lie on the couch and sleep for a month. But um, yeah, maybe I'm just not built for humidity. Having grown up in Albuquerque, maybe it's just in my bones.
Yeah, it's a lot different here for sure. I did the Houston Marathon and the
Hmm.
half, and uh, my friends kept on telling me, oh well, you got to be careful with the humid and this and that. But luckily, I mean, that's in January, so the heat's not too bad, and the weather this year was pretty perfect. That was that was nice. But I was kind of kept on trying to pay attention to like, am I gonna be dying?
Yeah, yeah. That was just a few months ago, right? It's usually
Yeah,
in January.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you did the full marathon or the half?
I did the half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a. I obviously wasn't there, but it was a decent day that day, I think. Um.
It was crazy windy the day before, but the day of, I mean, there were just gusts, but
Yeah.
nothing like spring in New Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I've never been to Houston. Actually, even though I have a lot of friends, sort of from law school and grad school, that ended up moving to Houston. Actually, never been. I am sort of, I think, tentatively planning to do the half in Houston in January. So maybe
Nice.
maybe that'll be my first time in Houston. Maybe I'll see you there.
I would love to go back. Actually, it was a really fun course. and the people along it. I mean, there was just people all along, and it was really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's those sort of fun spectator road races that are
Yeah,
so much more fun, I think, for everybody. Those road races that you do where there are people in the first mile and people in the last mile, and then you're just like out and it's quiet and you can hear birds chirping in the middle. Oh my god, those are so hard. Um, yeah, but though, so that's definitely great to hear about Houston. I'm glad the experience you had was good. Yeah, because it does seem like if there are people lining the course, like I've never done the Boston Marathon, but that's one of the things we're always talking about. People just
right.
lining the course, and it really does make it in the the few road races I've done that sort of have that atmosphere. They're just head and shoulders more fun than yeah, those quiet lonely ones.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, the energy just carries throughout, and then it's so big. I mean, obviously, you're a bit faster than me, but I, I had people around me the entire time,
Yeah,
whether I was catching them or they were catching me. There was just constantly people around until the last couple of miles. Once things spread out a bit more, it got a little bit, but there was still plenty of people around that it made it like this is great.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'm excited that hopefully I'll find myself there in January and can get a little taste of that same atmosphere.
Nice, nice. Well, that's good to know, something you have tentative on the calendar.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think I'm sort of I've been telling myself for a long time that I have a couple long-term running goals before I like am comfortable quitting running. Because I feel like we all hit that point when either you have to start taking it less seriously or spending less time on it, or even just quitting it outright because it's not what you need at that moment. Um, but sort of the one that I wanted to do when I started to kind of realize that I had a little bit of talent was just run the Olympic Trials Marathon. And sort of my secondary goal was running track USA's, which, I found out the last couple days was a lot closer than I thought. Turns out it's still not quite in my grasp, but it was a lot closer than I thought. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping that Houston in January, I will try to get the B standard in the half marathon that can set me up to run the Olympic trials in 2024. The B standard in the half is fast, so I don't know if I'll get it, but I think Houston in January 2023. So what is that? 6, 7 months from now? Um,
Yeah.
tentatively try to get it, but whether I get it or not, your guess is as good as mine. But it'll be fun to try.
Well, that's a fantastic goal. And I mean, I don't remember offhand what it is. I know it's faster than I think it's 2:18 straight up in the marathon to get in.
That
And
sounds right. Yeah.
but the half was significantly faster than the full marathon time.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in 2016 and it was 65 flat. And at the time I hadn't run that, but I thought, "Ooh, that might be doable on a perfect day." And then for 2020, I think they bumped it down to 64:30 or 64 flat. I don't remember. And I thought, "Ooh, that's tougher." I've now run 64 low, so I know that may have been like doable. But then for 2024, they cut the half standard to under 63 minutes,
That's what it
which
is. Yeah,
is that's a pretty significant jump. So I don't know. That's fast. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's and yeah. I mean, and I get it. They're trying to, focus primarily on the marathon part, but I, I don't know. I think I'm along the lines of what happened at Atlanta. The more the merrier. I think that's great for the sport and for everything.
yeah, I think I mostly agree with that. I think there is a ceiling. There is sort
Yeah.
of like I think you have to cut it at some point because if you had 5,000 people running the Olympic trials, I think it would just be too chaotic. You get a lot of people who are sort of probably like they would not be in shape and they would get in the way, and it's just purely sort of a fun thing. And
Right.
I think it might take a little bit of the sort of uniqueness out of the opportunity. but yeah, I definitely agree with cutting the standards too tightly so they can just like squish the field as tight as possible so it's the same sort of 10, 15 usual suspects who are competing for the spots. That's not fun to watch. And that way is like for the people like me that are sort of in between, it becomes either like I know I'm not as good as some of these people, but so at some point it becomes like why should I bother setting this as a goal when I know it's so far out of my reach. um and yeah, they sort of USATF plays a dangerous game sometimes, with with those standards and with fields and things like that. And
Yeah, and
sometimes they do a better job than others, but yeah, I think it is always fun if the trials in the last few years, the marathon trials has been in the 200-300 range.
right,
That seems to make sense because there's always people who are really talented that have breakout days, and that way you get people who are just really dedicated runners getting these standards to go out and sort of say they ran the Olympic trials, which is a fun thing for anybody to do. And it's always a yeah, I was not in Atlanta in 20 was it in 2020 when they did it before the COVID and all that?
yeah.
Yeah, it was
It was right before it was. They ran it in February, and then every most places started shutting down in March.
yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it seemed like a great atmosphere. And
Yeah,
yeah, I wish so, hopefully I'll be able to do that, and hopefully they don't shrink the standards too much in the coming years that it's just 10 15 people with one camera per person or something like that.
right.
That's
Well,
not
and
fun to
that's
watch.
yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, I don't think it should definitely be watered down. It shouldn't be, an open race where there's thousands of people or even high hundreds, but 200 to 300, like you said, is lofty enough, and it gives people a goal that I think is that just enough people can do it where it still means something, but also like somewhat attainable, even if you're not going to be like, I mean, yeah, it's 218 now, and most of those guys that sneak in under 218 on the men's side, they're not going to be competing for that top three spot,
Hmm.
but they get a chance to go out there and be in a fast race in in the USA and be out there in that atmosphere, and I think that's not going to hurt the sport.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I think yeah, if those fields get too tight, too small, I think that then becomes something that people who sort of have aspirations to run fast, and it's a sort of a fun thing for them, then it sort of removes one of the incentives to sort of it takes away one of the realistic goals, and then
right.
yeah, then it yeah, I mean, like I said, it sort of removes one of the incentives to keep training at a high level if you're so close or something. And I don't know. Yeah, so it
Right.
does. Hopefully the that it remains a attainable goal, and people can continue to have fun running big miles and trying to get the standard, because it does. Yeah, it's always fun. I There were just plenty of mornings in Austin when I remember, because a lot of the people that I would run with in Austin were sort of Olympic marathon trials qualifiers or hopefuls. And for a lot of them, they would spend years, meeting up in the mornings to say like, yeah, I'm going to see if I can get that 218, try to sneak under, get that 217.59, try to grab that standard. And then there's another incentive for that group to show up every morning and get their run in and sort of meet people and have a bunch of friends out there doing the same thing. And it's just a great way to it's honestly just a great way to have fun, right? So if you remove one of those incentives, then then not all, but one aspect
Right.
of the sort of running community and all the sort of warmth and growth and fun that it brings with it sort of dies, and that makes me sad.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Um, and to go back a little bit, talking about you going from Bates to University of Texas Austin,
Hmm.
and how, I guess maybe difficult is the right word, but Division 3 and Division 1 are pretty different. You alluded to a little bit of that, um, when we were talking earlier. But then on top of that, you're working in a pretty intense field that you're getting your graduate degree. You're working in PhD now. Like how difficult, I guess, was that transition to keep up that, moving from Division 3 where you're training
Yeah.
at that level, and then all of a sudden, like, you want to do that Division 1, but it's a step up plus the workload.
Yeah, I mean that transition was hard, to be honest. Like it's not, it doesn't necessarily illustrate the whole situation or describe the whole situation, but there is sort of a illustrative example. I'm not an insomniac, but during that first kind of month of living in Austin, when I was, meeting the cross country team at I think 6:30, or was it 6 or 6:30, like 5 days a week for a run, that we'd often find ourselves, breaking 6 minute pace before 7 o'clock in the morning in the dark, right? And it's just hard.
Yeah.
Um, and starting my PhD in a new city and all of this all at once, I was having real trouble sleeping for long periods of time, and it was sort of mentally stressful. It was physically stressful. It took me like several months before I started to feel kind of healthy and normal again. So yeah, it was very difficult, and there were times when, like, a lot of the my teammates on the Texas Longhorns had run in high school. They had come to Texas sort of for the cross country team, for the track team, sort of lore of running for the Texas Longhorns. That was sort of one of the big reasons, not the only reason, but that was, a principal factor in their decision to come to Austin to run for the University of Texas. And they took running very seriously and had for many years, because the expectations there are very high. The sort of financial considerations there are very high. Scholarships were attached. They throw money at you. If you're good enough, you can go pro, because Texas has all these Nike connections and things like that. Um, and that wasn't why I came to the University of Texas. And I came primarily for the PhD program and the law school. And so there was sort of an odd disconnect when I wanted to be just as dedicated and serious and talented as a lot of these just like incredibly quick, fast people. But I also had to sort of focus on my graduate work. And there were occasionally some odd kind of frictions. They were probably exacerbated by the fact that I was new to graduate school and just trying to wrap my head around a new city and doing this like a totally different lifestyle all at once. So there were definitely some odd moments, both with my graduate advisors and some of the professors in the PhD program, when I said like, "Ooh, I'm not going to be in class tomorrow," and they said, "Why can't you come?" And I said, "Well, I have a cross country meet," and they thought, and it was just very weird to be a PhD student like competing for a Division 1 team, and they would say, "Oh, a cross country meet, like, oh, do you run?" I would say, "Yeah," like, "Oh, what club do you run for?" And I was like, "Oh, I run for the team here." "What team here?" And I had like, "Oh, wait, you mean the cross country team?" And I would say, "Yes." It was just a weird, like a series of odd kind of discussions I never expected to have. Because there's just like those are two communities that don't overlap very much.
Yeah.
So there were sort of a series of odd moments and awkward conversations when I thought, "Ooh, I can't do this because I have to go. I have to go. I have an assignment I have to do. I have to hand in. I have a test or something, or vice versa. Oh, sorry, I have to miss this one thing. Can I make this up because I have to fly to Indiana to go run cross country nationals or something?" It was odd, and created for some sort of, in retrospect, amusing situations and amusing um, circumstances. But in the moment, it was difficult. Yeah, which is um, might explain why, I didn't run particularly well for them, and I feel like my own sort of academic professional development didn't really take off till after a couple years of being in Austin and things like that. So it definitely was hard, because I'm someone who wants to sort of excel at the things I choose to do. If I do something, whatever it is, I want to do it well.
Right, right.
I think a lot of people share that, but it's not particularly unique. But that's who I am. Um, so I wanted to run as well as I can, but also do as well as I could in law school and as well as I could in my PhD program. And that's a lot of things to add into a day. So it's definitely had its moments when it's pretty miserable, but on the whole, it's a lot of fun.
Well, and it's just, yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds uh, difficult. um, but there's so much you get out of running, which I'm hearing from you. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you've kept it up, through that to the point where you're still progressing now. What did that look like, I guess, from finishing up that year with that first year there at Texas, not
Hmm.
going back to the team, but continuing running? I mean, what was that like? And even, I guess, what made you want to continue after such a hard year?
Yeah. I mean, it was towards the end of my year at Texas when I finally broke 30 in the 10K, which had been a goal of mine at Bates, and I didn't get it. And at that moment, I thought like, okay, I'm starting to run some faster times, and I thought, you know, I was still relatively new to the sport because I didn't really start taking it seriously till I was 20, I think. Was it
Right.
21? I don't remember. So I feel like I didn't quite have as much mental fatigue as a lot of people do when they finish a fifth year of, after training really hard for the last 12 years of their life since they were 14 years old or something like that. I didn't quite have that because I was so fresh. And I sort of had the extra consideration of I started running in high school, and that's when my grades went up. I was a pretty average student until like junior year when I decided to start running. Nobody told me to. And that was also when I decided, you know what, I should do my homework. I shouldn't wait until my dad yells at me. I shouldn't wait until my mom says, "Oh, did you study for that test?" I should just do it myself, right? And when those two things overlap, then they reinforce one another, and that was when I started to get better grades in high school. And so I sort of had this other reason to keep running because it balanced out sort of my studies and sort of what, even though my studies and my job right now, they are one and the same more or less, because that's how a PhD work really works. um and so I never thought about quitting running. I never thought about stopping altogether. I definitely thought about not training anymore and not doing races, and there were definitely periods in there where I didn't race for many many months, and was not particularly fit. But it was all I would find myself going through these periods. I would not work out for a month or two, and then I would think, "Ooh, I'm feeling good today. I want to go run hard." So and that really was, I was just sort of kept going by a sort of running community that I had in Austin, some other friends who really enjoyed it, and it was just another excuse, like I said, to sort of get out the door every day and see the sun and sweat a little and feel good. And that sort of kept me going through the first few years. um, and I was coaching myself, writing all my own workouts when I would work out, choose when to race when I did race, um, and was still slowly getting better every year. So it was sort of fun because I wasn't, I was still dedicating a lot of time to it, but it was not a lot of mental energy. I wasn't, spending a lot of money. I wasn't thinking about like exactly how my training's going to go, what workouts I have to do at what moment, like am I going to get into this big race or not? I wasn't really worrying about all of that stuff. It was just sort of I was just going out and running for an hour a day, and then I'd go run 2 hours on Sundays. And um, but I was also still getting faster every year. I think I've PR'd in some distance every year since I started running.
Wow.
And so I thought, maybe I'll just keep doing this and see what happens. And at some moment, I'll try to string together a good 6 months of training and try to get that Olympic trials qualifier. But things have changed a little bit. So
How'd you go from writing your own programs and just kind of doing this. I don't want to just say for fun, but almost for fun, to
Mhm.
hopping on with railroad athletics.
Yeah, so blame Hayden Cox for that one. It's entirely his fault. And I'm sure if he listens to this, which I'll hound him and make him do it because now I'm giving him a shout out. He will definitely agree that it was entirely his fault. I had no intentions of being coached. It's sort of there are things about this story that also are very thematically similar to joining the team at Bates, right? When he approached me, because he's in law school at the University of Texas, and he had
Okay.
coached for a couple of years in between college and law school, and sort of started this railroad business in between, and carried it over to Austin. And he had a few athletes that he was coaching, and it's sort of an unusual business model, but it works for him and it works for me. It works for a lot of other people. And he started law school and found me. I don't remember how exactly. Maybe it's through Strava or something like that. And he said, "Hey, like I see you're a runner. Can we like run together sometime?" And I said, "Absolutely. The more the merrier." So he and I we would like run together occasionally. I was finishing law school and he was just starting, so we sort of had some things to talk about. And I sort of put him in contact with some of my other Austin running friends, and he sort of became a part of the Austin running community. And after a few months, he already told me about his little group. I was firmly opposed to joining for a while because I thought, I'm here doing my own thing. Things are set. I'm still getting better every year. It works for me. I don't want to change anything. I don't want to add an external stressor that's going to make this feel like an obligation. And he was very understanding but he was playing the long game. and and he thought, great, yeah, that's fine. Um, but after a few months, he did sort of sit me down and he said, like, look, I can make you faster. And I thought, like, I don't care. I don't want to get faster. I'm having a good time like this. Um, and but then there was a moment. He then began to coach some of my sort of running friends, and I saw them sort of out there having a good time. And then there was a moment. There was a sort of a what was it was the Loop Running Company in Austin. They organized a sort of 10-mile race around Austin in the dark, so it was like a night race. It was crazy, and he thought, "Will you wear my singlet just for?" Because I know like the Loop is really active on Instagram. They have a lot of exposure, and he said, "Will you wear my singlet? Sort of, if there are some photos of you, then we can post them and sort of try to get some more exposure." And I thought, okay, sure, I'll throw you a bone and do this for you, um, because at that moment I thought I was helping him, and it was not purely like I was doing this selfishly because I want to get faster. At that point, it felt much more symbiotic, and I agreed to wear a singlet, and I ran really well. And he was on a bike, sort of like yelling at me and yelling at some of the other uh, runners. I had a really good time, and a few months later, he thought, okay, like, what if I start to write some workouts for you? And I sort of broke down, and I was like, all right, you seem like a nice guy who cares about running and sort of understands the how I approach running and how I think about running and how I don't want to take it too seriously, but also take it very seriously at the same time. Um, and it's I feel like I sort of had to get to know him and his approach, and I, I wasn't actively thinking this, but I feel like I also had to be sure he understood the way that I approach running before I sort of agreed to um, work with him. And it has really actually turned out extremely well. It's a really well run little company. His coaching style is turns out it's working really well for me. And I'm having a lot of fun. And he's able to give me a little bit of financial support for some races, and he's put me in contact with some. I'm getting some sort of really excellent gear from Rabbit, like apparel company out in California. They've been making some of our uniforms, and just yeah, he's sprinkled in a few things into my training in such a way that it doesn't turn running into this whole monster that I feel like I'm tackling. But I'm getting a lot faster, so I'm really happy. I'm working with Railroad. There are a lot of sort of friends that I have in Austin who are working with Hayden and working with Railroad. It really is a group of just sort of eclectic, fun people who are just trying to run fast, and I feel like we share a lot, and there are a lot of people out there that have a lot of other things also going on in their life, but they sort of share this passion for going out there and running with your friends on Sundays and trying to run fast and be goofy and be stupid and see how fast you can run. And that's what I love about running. And so it's worked out really well for me. And um, I have every intention of carrying on in the future.
That's fantastic. And it's kind of funny because when you talked about getting into the cross country team at Bates, like
Hmm.
you said, it's very similar. Uh,
Yeah,
but one of the things you said was that you were worried that the running was going to become kind of take over every aspect of your life and kind of
yeah,
almost be a detriment to other parts.
hmm,
Obviously, you've talked that it's been a helpful part,
yeah,
but it's kind of funny, you know. It's almost like it has taken over a large part of your life. I mean, I know law school is a lot,
hmm.
and so to be able to continue running at your level, I mean, that takes a certain amount of commitment for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, running definitely does. Like, in no sense am I trying to make the argument that running does not take up a serious part of my life. It absolutely does. It dictates large parts of my day. But there's always this sort of worry that I have, whether it's logical or not. Right? I'm not trying to say it makes sense, but there's a worry that I have that running will become like a mental sort of imaginative mountain that I'm never able to climb, right? Because if I set really high goals for myself and I'm never able to see those goals and reach, then it becomes sort of an all-encompassing frustration that I'm not sort of making progress and I'm not being able to succeed at something that I had set out for myself. And I never wanted running to be that. I never wanted running to be like, you know what, I'm going to run in the Olympics. No, that is just not realistic for me at all. And I never wanted to set even sort of relatively comparable goals like that because then to me, running would become this sort of leviathan that I feel like I have to battle constantly is like a mental thing during my day. But if I approach running in a sense that I want to keep running fast because it's fun. It's fun to go out and run every morning. I feel good. Um, and if I, sort of set incremental little goals for myself and don't take myself too seriously, don't take the races too seriously, don't take everyone around me too seriously, and realize that we're all just like a bunch of people wearing little tiny neon shorts, just like screaming around the forest or like doing laps around the track. Right? It's just like it's a weird activity. And if I keep that in mind, then I find I enjoy it a lot more, and then I can sort of convince myself into being pleasantly surprised by how fast I run. It's no longer a finally I ran this fast, and it's like it weight off my shoulders. Then it's sort of an amusing like look what I just did. That was fun.
Yeah.
It sort of flips it a little bit. So I never wanted running to like be goal oriented per se, with sort of a couple small exceptions, like I said. So if I approach it more as a process and more of just like a constantly being amused and being pleasantly surprised by races and things like that and times I run, then to me it becomes less of a mental burden, and then it translates into has a spillover effect into other aspects of my life.
That's great, and I love that attitude. I mean, I can tell you're having fun with it. I think it's great. Like you definitely talk in these kind of, you definitely have some goals, but they're more general. Like you said, you're not like
Mhm.
necessarily like, yes, you're looking at that time because you'd like to hit that half marathon time to run the trials, but
Mhm.
you're not like focused on that time. You're just focused on this is what I want to do, and
Mhm.
so it makes it a little bit more general, which I personally like, and I think it can be hard for some people to do that. They have that, they just have that time in their head, and that's like you said, like I got to hit that time, I got to do this for that time, and there's something to that as well. But to be able to just have a general goal, it does almost make it seem a little bit more, well, I'm just trying to do this, whatever that time is, whatever the that means. I'm just trying to strive for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think another way to like think about it or explain it is like I am setting this goal for myself of whether it's Houston half in January or something. I would like to try to get, like run under 63 and a half marathon and get that qualifier. But what I'm not doing is going to let myself think like if I run 63:01 or if I run 64 flat or if I run 75 minutes, to me that's not a failure.
Right.
It's not like I did not meet the goal, so I wasted my time and I failed in my aspirations. No, if I run 63:01, that's really fast still, right? That's insanely fast. And it's not like a to me that's not a like a that does not mean that I've failed to meet my goals. It just means like, oh well, I still had a lot of fun doing this whole thing. Like I still ran really quickly. I had a lot of fun trying, and if I really try to take seriously and keep at the front of my mind that all the training is not about the race, because the training is really social. It's like a very social activity, and just like the rigidity that having to train every day gives to the rest of my day makes me more productive and things like that. So if I never reach those goals, it's not as if I have failed or something. I mean, other people can attribute that to me, sure, whatever, but that's not the way that I approach it. It's like, okay, it is true that I did not meet that arbitrary threshold, but there's so much else that I've gotten out of this, and it's still just like a lot of fun. Um, that thinking of it as a failure seems to betray all the other positive aspects that running brings into my life, and I know it brings into a lot of other people's lives in similar ways.
That's a great way to put it. And it's 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 fun hearing you talk about that. We talked a little bit earlier about your recent 10K time, and
Mm-hmm.
having some of those goals. You recently ran 28:44, which
Mm-hmm.
is fast. And you know hearing you talk and us talking, like, you ended up being pretty close to being able to get into this 10K championships that will, when this goes out, will have just happened as we're talking. It's happening tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
um, and so, but I there's not this sense of, like you're talking about, this sense of failure, or even really this bitterness. It's, well, it didn't work out, but man, I'm getting faster.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because even right now, like based on times, I should be in the USA 10K track field tomorrow night. There are two people that have slower times than I do. I beat two people in that race a few weeks ago, um, and based on everything, I apparently belong in that field, which is crazy to think about. There are 21 people because it looks like somebody scratched 21, 22 people in the field, and to think about that I should be in that field tomorrow night is shocking to me. And the reason I'm not is because Hayden Cox and I sort of made a little logistical error in not registering me for this meet because we were operating under the assumption that I was not get in because my time was not fast enough. So we missed this initial deadline by a few hours. And then when we tried quite hard to still get in absent that, offering to, we can give you all the information we need, we can still pay the registration fee, look, I still have this time. And we finally got a hold of people who, like, their race director and all that. Unfortunately, they had to honor that initial deadline, so they would not let me in. And I objectively, I can see why somebody would be really annoyed about this situation. Right? They had the opportunity to run at U.S. championships in the 10,000 meters on the track, try to earn a spot for world championships. I obviously like can't hit that standard, whatever it is, 27:20. That's quite a bit faster, but
Right.
have the opportunity to be in that race is a really exciting thing. This seems like a lot of fun. And I can see looking at this from the outside and thinking I should be really upset that I and there is a part of me that's a little frustrated, but at the same time, I know it's only running, and I still ran really fast, and I'm still having a lot of fun. And if I get too focused on, oh, we missed this deadline, that was a sort of a combination of both Hayden and me not really thinking about it too hard, um, then I feel like that's just a waste of sort of mental energy and emotional energy, and I can still try again next time, right? And because
Right.
there's nothing I can do about it now except probably drink a lot of wine while the race is happening, and be a little annoyed about it in the moment, but you know things things happen, so I can always try again next year, see what happens.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, I mean, I love your attitude through this. I mean, we've touched on it a little bit. I mean, your time management to take care of this stuff, to still do the other things in your life, to be going through a PhD program, a clerkship, like
Hmm.
that takes a lot of commitment. And I feel like if you want to achieve this, I think you're good, definitely going to, because it seems like you have that will, and that's almost half of it right there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I do have I am self-driven, and I do sort of have some dedication to a fault sometimes. Some people would definitely criticize me for sometimes being too rigid and setting my plans and things like that, and I'm very much guilty of that, right? I have a lot of flaws, um, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, I enjoy doing a lot of things that I do, and although sometimes there are those moments when I think, why do I do this to myself? But on the whole, I enjoy it, and yeah, the fact that I broke 29 was kind of a shock. And after I ran that race, I was thinking, like I feel like I ran quite hard. I was well under my 5K PR halfway through the race, and I thought it was going to be crazy hard. But I thought, I sort of shot for the moon, and got pretty close. And now I think, what happens if I go out a little bit faster now that I know I can do this? Or sort of the ceiling's been raised, and um, yeah, I feel like a lot of my rigidity and sort of dedication to certain processes, like the process of training and the process of doing all these things, can be draining at times. But it's been successful for me so far, especially now that I've gotten sort of assistance from Hayden as a coach, and sort of as a using railroad as occasionally a small sort of financial crutch. Um, it's I've noticed that it's funny that it's taken me this long to learn it, but occasionally if you reach out and ask for help, these things can go so much better, right? Who'd have thought?
Yeah, right. Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, you've had some college coaching and then did some stuff on your own. You're obviously, I mean, to be able to continue to PR on your own, and then now have that kind of focus structure with a coach. I mean, eh, to hit these different stresses in your body. It's yeah, like I said, I think I'm rooting for you. That's for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I'm rooting for myself too. I think this is always something that I find funny, is if people say, like, "Oh, I'm like surprised or not surprised you ran this time," or something. Like, I'm watching my own time progression just as curiously as everyone else, and it'll be just as a surprise or something. It'll be just as fun, because I feel like I'm watching myself in these races, thinking like, "Whoa, it's crazy that you're doing that," or like, "That guy's having a good time. This is crazy." And so I always, I there's a part of me that likes to treat myself as an external observer to this own odd activity, because that again just makes it more fun. So um, yeah, I mean, I've been to sort of get back into the nitty gritty briefly. Some of the workouts that I've been doing in the last few weeks are things that I never ever would have thought I would have been able to do. And it really is just like, run more hills and more strides. That's Shout out to Hayden for reminding me that I should do some strides once in a while. Um, And yeah, the idea that like I'm in 3 weeks or so, no, about 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks, flying out to Portland for the Portland Track Festival 5K, which is not a race I would have thought I would have been able to get into. And the idea that I'm tentatively hoping to run in the 13 mids or something, um,
Wow.
is, I mean, I have no idea if I will. Right? There's a
Yeah.
solid chance I'll run 16 minutes and have to walk. Right? Who knows? Um, but the fact that I'm even thinking about that as maybe an outside possibility, I think is fun. I think it's funny. It's sort of just interesting to juxtapose the sort of, I was an 18-minute 5K runner when I was 21 years old or something, and now I've cut possibly as much as 5 minutes off that time, and so who knows, right? We'll see.
Well, like I said, that's amazing. I'll be keeping track of that and sharing anything that you post or Railroad Athletics posts on that. Again,
Awesome, I
I
appreciate it.
love you. I love your attitude, and I think this is a great spot to kind of wrap up.
Mhm.
So I'll just ask you the last question I ask everybody, and that's just, what are you listening to get you pumped and ready to go out for a, workout or sit down and get ready to study?
I have wildly disparate music tastes. So typically, I'm sort of a classical music person. I grew up playing piano and listening to some opera, and so that's the bulk of my listening. But there are times I go through phases. But right now, the last few weeks, I find myself really really enjoying 2010s pop stuff that I think is objectively garbage. But sometimes when I'm driving to a run, there's a small part of me that when I play those songs, I get a little bit of high school nostalgia, and I get really pumped up. But it definitely comes in phases. There are other times when I simply can't tolerate that music. But yeah, so it it comes in waves, and it's a surprise to me sometimes. So yeah, 2010s pops, those like summer hits. It's just garbage music. It's so terrible, but really hits the spot sometimes.
That isn't. I mean, there is a lot of garbage in that for sure. I will.
Oh, absolutely. I don't deny that at all.
I'm always curious with people who have some sort of music background.
Hmm.
Um, do you ever find yourself kind of like on a long run or anything like, I don't want to say counting beats, but like almost have that like metric beat with your feet that that you have in that music, like tempo?
Yeah, actually, all the time. I sometimes in the middle of a run, a song I haven't heard in months or weeks will pop in my mind, and it like footsteps will act as a metronomic, and the song is playing in my head while I do it. Um, and yeah, and then as soon as it runs over, the song will leave my mind, and I don't think about it for another few weeks or something until I hear the song again. But yeah, that happens all the time.
That's so interesting to me. I've heard it before. It's just it's very interesting to me. So that's
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's done research on that. Some awesome psychologist or something that's done research on that. I don't. That's not me.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
Well, like I said, this has been a lot of fun. I'm excited for what you do in this 5K coming up. I'm excited for what you do in your half, whether it's Houston or if you go somewhere else. I'm really just I just want to see what you end up doing. So good luck on all that. Like I said, I'll continue to follow. Maybe have you back on after the half marathon or something.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
I don't think so. No. Yeah. I mean, thanks for having me on. It's been fun talking to you and sort of trying to bring this whole running thing and talk about it in a way that makes sense because I don't often get the opportunity to nail it down. I just go ahead and do it and go out for a run with my friends, but I don't often get to actually think about and articulate all these things. So that's been sort of nice. And so yeah, I mean, I I like your your podcast, sort of running in New Mexico thing. As I mentioned, I'm firmly of the belief that Albuquerque is the best place in the world to run. All these trails, gorgeous weather, so many great people out there for a run, and so I'm a fan.
I'd once again like to thank my guest for their time, and thank you for tuning in. If you have the opportunity, please rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, or just help spread the word. Music was provided by Philip Friedman. You can follow him on SoundCloud at DJ Teach. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at RunningNM. Feel free to drop me a line or shoot me an email at runningnewmexico@gmail.com if you have any questions or know of someone who should be interviewed. In the meantime, keep running, New Mexico.